separate you.
Recording in progress.
Okay.
Good.
We're going to, sorry about that. We're going to separate you into two groups, male and female. And the reason is that in the past, when we were in person, we found that there were questions that different folks wanted to answer and felt more comfortable if they were in a certain group. So we're going to try that. Plus the fact we got a grant from the California Commission on the Status of Women, and they are very excited about women becoming doctors. So, but that's their goal, and that's their particular unique mission. So we're excited about everybody becoming doctors, okay? And then the third one, all of you will have to do some kind of surgery rotation. So there's a lot of surgeons coming in, everything OB, GYN docs, general surgeries, ortho, the whole bit. This is a crazy fun panel. So just enjoy it. Again, no question is not something you can ask whatever you want to ask. And then we will wrap up with splitting you off into your various groups for your project health topics. And we tried to give everybody their first choice, but if not, we gave you your second choice. Many of you, there was some of the topics that it was just so many people, we couldn't put everybody in the same group. But regardless, this project should not be overwhelming to you because it's a team project. And the project coordinators, who are all going, hopefully will be in medical school in the next year or two, have a format that will give each one of you so much to do, each team member a part of it, so you won't have to do the whole thing. And if everybody holds up their part, then it should not be overwhelming to everyone, and you should have a great team project. As you know, medical school and residency, and then even practicing, it's about a team. It's not just about one person. So this is a real exercise in that to try to get everyone to gel together in a health situation on something that you all are interested in and want to see and work as a team project to see it successful. So with that said, do we have any questions that anybody would like to ask right offhand? Okay, now, no questions? Okay. Now, the virtual coordinators have asked me to ask you guys to all turn on your cameras this morning, right now, so we can see you all. And I think she takes a snapshot. Is that right, Carolyn? Carolyn?
Yes.
And Tracy?
Session, I will take pictures, and I'd love to see your beautiful faces this morning. So please turn your cameras on. Thank you.
Okay. And by the way, the reason we ask for your photos is because when we do the closing ceremony, you guys will present your project with your team coordinators, and we want to put your beautiful photos up. So that's why we wanted your photos. We're just not collecting photos, so you know that. Okay, so with no questions, any more comments from either Ms. Washington or Ms. Broadhead Frith? Any other questions, comments you guys want to make? Okay, so then I guess what we'll do is move into our first workshop for the day. Residency programs, your next step after medical school. And I would like to start out by introducing our panel moderator, Dr. Jennifer Lasario. She is Associate Dean of Admissions and Vice Chair of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. She's in the Department of Anesthesiology and Pediatric Medicine and OBGYN, and she is at the University of California, David Geffen School of Medicine. Welcome, Dr. Lasario and panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. We have a great panel, and I'm going to have each of us introduce ourselves, and then we can spotlight as each of us introduce. I thought this is a wonderful panel, and I think Stelfana made the important point that it is about residency, because a lot of times we think about the next step, and we really need to think about the journey. So As was mentioned, I serve as the admissions dean at the David Geffen School of Medicine. I also lead the financial aid office and scholarships, and I also lead the pipeline and outreach within the David Geffen School of Medicine. So I look at this from the perspective of the journey that you're going to take, and your journey's already started, and your journey is going to continue well beyond medical school, and that's going to include residency and maybe fellowship and then your career. So having us today talk to you about residency and that part of the journey is really important. I will share with you a little bit about my background. So I am a first generation. I grew up in Los Angeles. I am Mexican and indigenous. And so for me, my understanding of a health career really was thinking about it from the perspective of medical school. And so when I started in med school, this is like, I'm gonna, confess to you that I didn't quite understand residency and what that meant. And I kind of learned on the fly, like as I was in medical school within that first, couple months, that there are residencies, which are additional training. We call it graduate medical education beyond my medical school. And I didn't entirely understand that. And so you are already way ahead by having this discussion that we're going to have today. And so it's important to think about it. Nobody has to decide right away what you're going to do. You're going to meet our panelists who have a different journey that they may have had and why they're doing the particular specialty, and they'll talk about that. I ended up doing OBGYN, and I went to UCSF for my residency. And once I finished, I practiced for 2 years, and then I did something a little bit atypical. I decided to go back and do another residency. You don't have to do that. I think it was, it added extra time, but I decided to do anesthesia. And then I did a additional fellowship training, which was an additional year doing OB anesthesia. So it was a sort of subspecialty within anesthesia. I served as the program director for that fellowship. And so I think, that I have that perspective of what graduate medical education is, and I'm happy to talk about that. So with that, and my sort of introduction, I'm going to actually turn it over to our other panelists and have them give an introduction. We want to spend some time, so think about this. We want you to ask your questions. The most important thing about these panels is to really get your questions asked, and you can ask anything. If you want to go live and unmute yourself, you can ask, or if you don't feel comfortable, feel free to put it in the chat. So next up is Dr. Carol Miller. And I will have her introduce herself to you, but I've had a chance to know Dr. Miller for quite some time. Obviously, we crossed over in our clinical work, and she'll tell you why. And we crossed over in our academic work. So Dr. Miller, I turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lucero. And it's so nice to see you again. You were in San Francisco when we were colleagues together, and after you went back down to Southern California, I haven't had the chance to work with you as much as I did when you were up north. So good morning, everyone. I am, as you know, my name is Dr. Carol Miller, and I am a pediatrician. I have been on the faculty of the School of Medicine at UCSF for about 40 years. My career journey has a lot of similarities to what you heard from Dr. Lucero. I have a hobby. I'll start with this. I have a hobby, and it's genealogy. And through genealogy, I discovered over the 25 years or so that I've been really into it, that every line of my family, both on my mother's side and my father's side, goes back to slavery. So I stand on those shoulders fairly heavily, and having understood that and having identified who those people were has given me a very different perspective of who I am, my connection to this country, and my stake in what I do. And through that process, I also found out that I had an ancestor who was actually one of the first physician to be licensed in the state of Oklahoma. So and that was a unusual find, because up until then, I was the only doctor in my family that anybody knew. But anyway, I digress. My journey, I was the first to go to college. I don't have any professionals in my family, at least at the time that I was coming up. And so I really did not even consider medicine until I was in college. I was interested in biology. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I majored in it and wasn't sure what I was going to do. Through the course of my undergraduate experience at Stanford, which is where I went to school, I was somewhat panicked at when I was a senior, and I realized that I was going to be graduating, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and I still didn't have a notion. I knew I didn't want to be a researcher, and I knew that teaching at that time was not really what I wanted to do, and I couldn't really think. I had no advisors. I really couldn't think of anything else. And I knew that I wanted to serve and make people's lives better. That was really clear, but I didn't know how that was going to happen. And at some point, those two interests came together as medicine, but almost half the year of my senior year was gone before I realized that. So it was a scramble to apply to medical school. And the reason I say that, start with that, is because in some ways it kind of typified my whole educational and career journey. It was one of not really having the mentorship or the knowledge about the process, so I couldn't really think about it in a preparatory way. And then having something open up, an opportunity open up itself, and then me feeling like it was something I wanted to do, and I just went with it, and it sort of worked out for me. I think a little bit of that is healthy in as you are navigating your career, but not a lot. I really want to emphasize that I think it's so much better when you have the understanding and knowledge and can prepare. So while I was in medical school, I didn't even understand residency. I didn't even know I had to. I thought you went to medical school, you got your degree, and then you could go practice. I didn't understand that there was more to the training, so that took a little time. And I actually got initially interested in OBGYN. I actually thought that's what I was going to do. But I had some role models at Stanford that were in GYN, the faculty, and those role models were not particularly inspirational to me. And I felt like if if these are the kinds of people that are going to be work in this discipline, that wouldn't work for me. So I had to think a little bit more, and I realized that what I liked was the obstetrics part. What I liked was the moms and babies, and really what I liked was the perspective of the babies to the moms. So I chose pediatrics as to do my internship and residency in. That's what I very much enjoyed it. It's been a wonderful experience for me. I particularly was drawn to the medicine and to the development of new families and newborns. So I did some additional training, a fellowship in neonatology, and this is where Dr. Lucera and I overlapped, because she was an obstetrics and obstetrical anesthesia, and I'm doing neonatology, which is the care of newborns in the intensive care nursery and otherwise. And so our paths clinically cross quite a bit. At some point, I became interested in medical education and teaching and advising. And mostly that came because when I took I was in private practice before I went to the university. And when I went to the university, the one thing that's different than in private practice is the opportunity to engage in training and supporting the students and residents. So I became interested in that. I became primarily interested in advising. And in fact, there is a panelist that you're going to hear from shortly for whom we had an advisee-advisor relationship. And so medicine has been for me an opportunity to explore a variety of career paths over time. I'm now retired on recall, which means I come back to teach and I come back to take care of patients in the nursery. But that two-pronged career of being involved in medical education and advising students and taking care of patients has been the basic theme throughout my career. And it's been a wonderful experience for me. I did want to say, if I could, Dr. Lucero, I'm not sure how many of the students know the whole process. So I wanted to take like 30 seconds to say that in medical school, it is important to start at the very beginning, thinking about what your interests are, how you might see your career evolving. And it's important to do those self-reflections from periodically so that you can map out your experiences in medical school to help you get to that point. So I would really want to encourage you just to, as you're in medical school and as you're working hard to learn the medicine, be also thinking about how does your experiences resonate with you? What could you see yourself doing? Who are the physicians and that you run into that you admire and the things that they're doing? How does that match up with you? Find an advisor. Understand that residency is a competitive application process so that you can best position yourself to get into the residency that you would want and train in a way that will advance the career in a way that resonates with you. So, you want to be, you want to be thinking throughout medical school how to leverage your own special interests. So in pediatrics, the residency is 3 years with an optional 4th year as a chief resident with increasing areas of responsibility. There are 210 programs in the United States, and each program, each state has anywhere from 5 positions available to 400 and over 400 in New York. So a wide range of residency opportunities in pediatrics. And so you would want to make sure that you engage with people, with those who are charged with advising students along the pediatric pathway, if pediatrics is where you want to go. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. I'm actually now going to introduce Dr. Godzich, which I think Dr. Miller alluded to in her introduction of one of the as paths cross. And we always say, I tell our students the world is small, so our paths will cross again. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mika Godzich and introduce herself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. My name is Mika Godzich. I'm a family medicine physician, and I went to UCSF for medical school where Dr. Miller was one of the college advisors and was kind enough to write a letter for me to receive an award. And I'm grateful to her for that. And I absolutely agree, Dr. Lucero, the world is small. And so be aware that your interactions matter and there are opportunities being created in this very space. And some of you may be classmates, in a year or two. Some of you may be working together in 5 years. Just make sure that you are respectful, kind, thoughtful, and continue to grow your relationships over time, because they do matter. I had some money associated with that award, and I'm grateful for Dr. Miller to allowing me to obtain that. So, and I will tell you, sometimes there are people who say, "Oh, I don't know that person well enough." You know, if we are in teaching, if we are in medical education, we want you to succeed, and we will find something nice to say about you, and you can just tell us what you want us to say, and we will put our name to it, because we believe in you and we're grateful that you're here. So as I said, I'm a family medicine physician. I am faculty at UC Davis in the Department of Family Medicine. I'm associate program director for the Residency of Family Medicine, and I'm also director of the academic coaching program at UC Davis. And I had a little bit of a bumpy road to entry in med school. I thought that I might want to do research. I was in a lab. It was okay. And then something really not great happened. My lab director died in a plane crash. And I remember having this thought as I was actually getting ready for his ceremony of life. I was in the shower and I'm washing my hair, which always takes a minute. And I thought, oh gosh, maybe I can go to med school now. Oof. And so I took some time and I taught high school and I loved it. And then I tried to apply to get into med school without any sort of, support, and just kind of winging it. And I did not have, the preparation. Sometimes you need the extra preparation. So I got into a post-bac program, which was wonderful, because suddenly I had a community of people who wanted to do the same thing as me, and who had gone through a process of maybe taking the MCAT and not doing well and needing help. And yeah, the teaching of the high school students really taught me a lot about how to communicate. And then it also opened doors for me and allowed me access to folks who could support me as I applied to med school. And I got into med school. I was thrilled to come off UCSF's waitlist. And so if you're on the waitlist, it's not the end of the world. You may eventually end up in the place you want to be. And it was a good fit for me. And when I started medical school, I thought I wanted to do surgery. I was head of the surgery interest group. I hung out in the OR with the chief of surgery, and she told me all her stories about how her kids didn't really like the fact that she was a surgeon all day, all long. But she said, if you're a surgeon, you have to sacrifice and all of that. I took trauma call, and it was good. I also happened to get involved in some medical education stuff. At the time, in the medical school, there was a lot of material and the content in the curriculum that made some associations around certain conditions and being Black. And I and another medical student were, we kind of brought that a little bit to the school and said, how come it's always the Black patients who have kidney disease, and what are we talking about here, and what are these associations we're making, and can we start thinking about this better? And so I got involved with that, and it was a lot of family docs who were talking about that curriculum. It was a lot of family docs who were like, we could probably do this better. Let's have some reflection about what we're trying to do, right? And so I had this interest in surgery because I liked fixing things, and this whole idea of fixing someone's blood pressure. That's not satisfying, right? But I was hanging out with people who had my values, right? When it was the medical education stuff, and those folks were family docs. And so when I did my clerkship in surgery, so there's this whole thing where the first 2 years, you don't have a lot of time to spend in the different specialties. The first 2 years of med school, it's a lot of knowledge acquisition, a lot of just kind of assimilating information, being passive. And then in third year, you're finally doing the stuff, and you're finally in medicine, and you get a chance to do a deep dive. And so I was in the surgery clerkship, and this is the stint of time that you spend on a specialty service. And I love the OR. Like, time would disappear when I was in the OR, and that was fantastic. But I would ask people about, like, what about? I have a specific example. patient getting a colostomy. So a colostomy is when you have externalization of the intestines because your intestines don't work as well. So you need to create a hole on the stomach, sorry, on the abdominal wall, and then you have a bag where the contents of your intestines go. And it's a very important surgery that makes a huge difference in people's lives. But as you can imagine, it's not a small thing for people to live with a colostomy, right? And so one of the patients who was getting a colostomy was a mail carrier, and he had his strap over his chest, and he was eager to get back to work. And I asked the surgical team, so what are we going to do? And naively, I'm like, can we put the colostomy site somewhere else so he can put his bag there? And he really wants to continue to be a male man, and there just wasn't. There wasn't curiosity from the surgical team about how this person was going to live the life that they wanted to lead with this new condition that we were creating in their body. And that was disappointing because I had lots of questions that the team that I was working with weren't exploring. They were very interested in the procedure and all of those things. And so that I felt unmoored. I felt like I didn't have those values, and perhaps a little bit of what Dr. Miller was naming with the gynecological not feeling inspired by the folks that she was with. And so when I did my family medicine rotation, they suddenly were answering questions that I hadn't even asked. They were saying the things that I was curious about before I even had a chance to ask the question. And I realized, you know what, this is a values alignment. This is about sharing values about what I care about. And these people in this profession care about the things that I care about. And suddenly, yeah, I'm managing blood pressure medicine. I'm managing diabetes, the stuff that I was laughing at before. And so, what I'm sharing with that is that your story doesn't have to be a straight line as you're doing this. You can change it up. You can find your heart and your home in different places, and you don't have to be a single person for your entire life. And there's not a single story to who you are. And I do actually appreciate very much Dr. Miller naming the fact that you should be thinking about it from the day you step in the door, because unfortunately it does matter. And those connections you make with people in your first and your second year and third year are the ones that you're going to use when you're applying to residency at the beginning of your fourth year, and it's going to creep up on you. And so I had fortunately had these relationships with folks from family medicine, from the curricular work that I had been doing, and was able to use their knowledge to apply to residency. And it worked out well. And family medicine residency is a 3-year residency, and I chose to do a very full spectrum family medicine residency in Contra Costa County, where we staff the ICU, the ED, the inpatient wards, and obstetrics. And I learned C-sections and care for hospitalized patients. And so after leaving residency, I worked in rural towns in northern Washington state, and provided full spectrum care there. My parents are aging, and they are in the Bay Area, and so I came back to this area of Northern California in 2017 to be closer to them, and settled in at UC Davis. And one of the reasons that many of us choose academic medicine is the ability to teach, work with students, work with residents, but also the opportunity to do lots of different things. So I continue to staff labor and delivery. I continue to deliver babies, and I continue to have full spectrum outpatient care where I provide care for newborns, the elderly, pregnant people, and everyone else in between. So, and I love procedures. I continue to love the OR, and I have the ability to do lots of fun things as a family doc, and really meet my patients' needs in 85% of the cases, and be able to refer them to what they need in the other 15%. And so I'm very grateful to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. So, and the next panelist that I'd like to introduce is Dr. Wheeler. And Dr. Wheeler will talk a little bit more about the work that he does, but he is at Kaiser Permanente, which is a very large health system that cares for our large swath of our communities, both in Northern California and Southern California. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wheeler to get more specific and also talk about his journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lucero, and good morning to all of you. It's so great to be with you, and hopefully last Saturday today and the subsequent programs will be very helpful in your direction. It is a small world, and there are so many parts of each of our stories that do intersect. And so as I listen, there are similarities. So I'll just tell you a bit of few of the highlights of my journey, because I think that's important. And I started actually in the southern rural state of Arkansas, where there were no Black or brown physicians in my community. So I didn't have any real role models to see. And at the time I started elementary school, we were in a 2-room schoolhouse, 1st through 4th in one room, 5th through 8th in the second room. And it was in the end of my 5th grade year when the state of Arkansas closed down the rural schools and we got bused into town. So bused into town for me meant 5 miles into Arkadelphia, which was a town of 10,000. And because everything was segregated, my school bus trip, which should have taken about 15-20 minutes, took an hour and 15 minutes because we had to go through 2 other rural communities to pick up Black families' children, because those communities were primarily white, and of course the buses couldn't pick up those kids because they had to stay segregated even on the buses. So that was the environment, and at that point the schools, elementary school went through 6th grade, high school started at 7th grade, so 7th through 12th was high school. During that time, of course, our high school was the single high school and was segregated, and the Arkadelphia High, which was the other school, was all white. And it was an experience that, you know, we grew up, teachers that were very concerned about us, wanted to make sure we were prepared and we were committed and dedicated. Even at the rural school, you know, where the 2 teachers were, they were part of our community. Our families knew them. They knew all of the kids in your family, et cetera, and had taught most of them. So they knew what to expect, and they pushed us to excellence. And in my family were also a lot of folk in education, sister and brother that were teachers, a grandfather who had a teacher and had been president of the Arkansas Education Association earlier on. So it was embedded in me. And so on graduating from high school, I went to the local college, which had become integrated about 3 years earlier. Arkadelphia had a private college and a public college. So I went to Henderson State University, talked to one of the pre-med advisors there and asked him, because I knew a bit more about pharmacy, because in high school, senior year, we had each did a project and wrote a paper about what we might want to go into. Mine was on aeronautical engineering. My friend Ken did his on pharmacy. So about the time we were starting college, the aeronautics industry was sort of laying off thousands of people. So I said, thought back about the paper that Ken had presented on pharmacy. So I talked to the pre-med advisor. So I said, what's the difference between pre-med and pre-pharmacy? He said, well, they're pretty much the same, one additional course required for medicine. I said, okay, so then I'll do pre-med and pre-pharm. And so I did that in 2 years in a summer, and then applied to pharmacy school. And since my sister had gone to graduate school at Michigan State, she wanted me to come and go there. Turns out they didn't have a pharmacy school. So I ended up going to University of Michigan for pharmacy school. And it was really there where I really grew and blossomed and learned a lot more about the world of education, the opportunities. I got to see a lot of folk who were role models, people in the medical school, the pharmacy school, the graduate school, et cetera. And so that was really my sort of growing up experience. And while there, did a semester abroad at the University of Paris. And that was an awesome international experience. And at the end of my pharmacy school, applied to medical school. And so decided to hold my acceptances in California because I thought that's where I wanted to come. My uncle and aunt lived in LA. So I kept my acceptance at USC and UC Irvine. Came out to study for my board exam in pharmacy and decided to go to Irvine for med school. It was a newer program and had some very interesting opportunities to do fast tracks and honors track, et cetera. So I got licensed in pharmacy, worked as a part-time pharmacist while I was in med school, and ended up doing the 15-month. We were in a 15-month pilot program where we did the first 2 years in 15 months. So that was awesome, gave some real flexibility. So as a result of that, I graduated from med school in 3.5 years, and then did a 6-month research fellowship at the King's College Hospital in London on their liver failure unit. And I was really sort of dancing between primary care and pediatrics, but I loved facial plastic surgery as well. I had done lots of elective there and spent lots of time in the OR doing 10, 11, 12-hour cases, et cetera. But it was like 7 years to get there. So I was like, I don't know if I want to commit to 7 years. So it turns out I ended up after doing my sub-Is, put my #1 ranked program in peds at Boston City Hospital, which is where I matched. So I went to Boston City for pediatrics, great program. And my first rotation was an elective one on pediatric neurology, and Dr. Paul Rossman, the director of the program, was on service as the attending. And about 3 months after that, after grand rounds one day, Dr. Rossman asked me if I'd considered to do a ped neurology fellowship. And I said, no, I hadn't. So he said, well, we're starting to get applications for 3 years from now. It's a 3-year program. They accept 2 people. So I thought about it. After 2 days, I went back to him and said, yeah, I would like to apply. So I ended up applying. And I told him on one condition, if I accepted, I would love to do my 3rd year at a different institution rather than doing the 6 years straight there. So anyway, applied, I got accepted, ended up doing my 3rd year piece at LA Children's, which was awesome. I kept going coast to coast, back and forth. I did twice in med school to New York. At any rate, did my 3rd year there and then back to Boston for my ped neurology for 3 years. And doing ped neurology, I had a similar experience where our EEG reading, we got staffed by folk at BU as well as at Harvard and Tufts. And doing my 2nd year, one of the program directors in epilepsy at Children's invited me to apply for their fellowship program. So I ended up doing that. And so at the end of my 3 years of ped neurology, ended up applying for epilepsy seizure fellowship, which I did at Children's Hospital in Boston, and also did a cerebral palsy fellowship there as well simultaneously. So that was really, ended up being 7 years of training. So there you have it. So you never know how much time will be required and committed to what you want to do. So at the end of that, it turned out that a couple of people who had trained in Boston were here at Kaiser Permanente, and they wanted to have a PD neurology program started. And so one of their co-trainees, who was a professor of mine at Boston, connected us, and we talked, and I came out to interview. And so that's sort of how I started my job here. So again, very small world. Once I transferred and got out here, I was on the faculty at UCSF for about 30 years in the division of ped neurology. Also doing my first 3 years, I did some general peds practice while building up the ped neurology practice. And I have 8 patients from my general peds practice that are now physicians. So just want to say that how important role modeling is for each of us as we interact with patients, with families, with community, et cetera. I'm very much a proponent of that. Starting out with the ped neurology practice, we've now built that practice to 16 ped neurologists across Northern California and pretty much most specialties. And of course, the last several years, we've got pediatric neurosurgery as well. So it's been an amazing journey during that time. I also had the opportunity to serve as an assistant physician-in-chief for 7 years, and then physician-in-chief for one of our medical centers for 18 years. In the last 6 years, I've been a regional medical director for undergrad and graduate medical education. So it comes back around full circle. I've been in education, directing all of our residency and fellowship programs, a lot of our pipeline programs, supporting medical student education. We train about 800 medical students across our 21 hospitals in Northern Cal each year. We have trained about 1,800 residents and fellows. We have 34 residence and fellowship programs in Northern Cal. A lot of collaboration with our Southern California colleagues as well in UME-GME. And of course, a lot of collaboration with Stanford and UCSF and UC Davis and Toro and California North State University College of Medicine, et cetera. And of course, we have all kinds of programs that students get to participate in. Introduction to Integrated Healthcare, which is a rising second-year medical student program. We have a medical student scholarship program for rising fourth-year medical students. And then, of course, tons of sub-Is. We have 4 satellite campuses. We have a Drexel University College of Medicine satellite campus, as well as BU, and 2 UCSF, our CLIC program, CLIC SF, and CLIC East Bay, which is for third-year students who spend their full third year with us for med student core clerkships. So it has been an amazing program. I do a lot of outreach to our HBCU medical schools and also to other schools across the country as we attempt to really walk that walk of equity, inclusion, diversity, belonging, anti-racism, allyship, et cetera. Kaiser Permanente has been really big. We'll have our 45th annual conference coming up this fall of for diversity as well. So I'll stop there and look forward to answering questions that you may have. Obviously, there's a lot more to share, but I won't try to share it all. Thank you, Dr. Lucero.
Thank you, Dr. Wheeler. So I, again, want to open it up for questions. You can either use the hand raise function if you want to go live. That's down at the bottom. I think we have that option. And then, or you can just put it in the chat. And I already see we have some questions here. I wanted to mention a couple things that just to highlight in the stories is that there was always this idea of time and trying to sort of say, oh, I don't want to do this because of time. I've had the same thing where I thought I don't want to spend so much time. I've done so many other things. So you have to follow, and I think another theme is following what you're passionate about and what you enjoy doing, and don't think about it in the time, because it's a journey. Again, it's a whole process. So we have a question, actually 2 questions. We'll start with the first one. How can you be certain which specialty is the one? For more competitive specialties, especially, I could imagine the value in those early connections and publications, especially now that step 1 is pass fail, but also know that, as you mentioned, passions can change. So I think that's a great question, and I'll open it up to the panelists, and we'll start with that first question. So, how can you be certain which specialty is the one? And then we can talk about the competitive, the quote competitive specialties. So anybody want to tackle that?
Okay, I'll start because I just want to say everybody on this panel I've intersected with professionally and or socially over the years. And each time I've worked with each one of you today, I've learned something new that I didn't know about you before. So this is an additional pleasure being on this panel because I'm learning something new about people who I've known and admired. And Dr. Wheeler, in my genealogy group, we have a saying that says all roads lead to and from Arkansas. So I didn't know about your Arkansas connection. Anyway, so to get to the question, how do you know that which specialty is the one? So first of all, I'm going to debunk the expectation that there's only one specialty that you would be happy in, okay? We are complex human beings where there are lots and lots of areas in which we can be happy. And likewise, they are probably for most of us, there are several specialties in which we could have a fulfilling and thriving and joyous career. So I don't want you to be anxious about trying to find the one, okay? The the way in which there's two parts to this selection issue in my mind. One is to have a really good sense of who you are, what your values are. Why did you go into medicine? What did you hope to contribute? Because medicine is a service. This is not, this is a service profession. We go into it because we want to serve. We want to make people's lives better in some way or another. So be able to identify and specify what that means for you. Where do you get where do you feel the most uplifted? What engages you the most, and what interests you the most? So you start with a real sense of who you are. And then you start exploring to see where, what specialties, what disciplines match. And I think one of the panelists said that, match your values. And you start to explore those. You look and see who are the people that you admire. Do you admire them because they reflect your values? Talk to them. How is it that they chose the career, the specialty that they chose? And understand that you are making a residency decision is one decision in a lifetime pathway. Okay, you're not really making a lifetime decision about what you're going to do. If one thing that I hope came through our stories is that not one of us started one place and stayed in one place. We all have evolved. Okay? And that's one of the beauties of the profession of medicine. It allows you to do that. So I would say, stop being anxious about the need to select the specialty. Start to explore, understand who you are, and it will eventually come to you which ones really are most likely to suit who you are, and from those you'll make the decision.
Yeah. Sorry, do you want to?
So Dr. No, go ahead.
I was actually going to say that you probably have a lot of insight as someone who's done 2 different residencies about that choice and why, but I'll just say very briefly that to emphasize what Dr. Miller named, finding out who you are is the first step in figuring out where you land, right? And so it really is determining where you thrive. When are you still happy to be woken up at 3 a.m, right? And so when it comes to thinking about residency and thinking about, oh my gosh, it's 3 a.m, I just fell asleep at 1 a.m. If someone pages me and says, there's a gunshot wound in the ER, am I gonna roll my eyes, or am I running out the door with half my scrub pants on? Thinking about where you get your joy is very important. So knowing yourself is a huge part of this journey. And then finding opportunities to spend time in those spaces that you're thinking about. And finally, again, as Dr. Miller said, it is, the long game. What are your values? How are you best going to be able to live them out? For example, I love the OR, time disappears when I'm in it, et cetera, et cetera. I also am interested in systems work. I'm interested in education. And there's less time for that as a surgeon. And so you make choices about what your long game is, right? And what your values are. So that's what I'll say on that.
Thanks. I'm gonna touch on a couple different things that are going to, and I think we have some additional questions that we've been getting in the chat. So first off, I do talk to a lot of students that meet with me that ask me because they're considering different specialties, and I do have that perspective of having done both. Trained in both specialties, and sometimes people do decide, and I've just had a recent conversation of someone who's spent a year, they're in their intern year, and I'm going to break down sort of the residency part because it's a little bit unique in that I don't think there's any other career where you have residency, what we call this match, and you heard some of us refer to it in our discussion. I matched in this, and so what does that mean? But there are times when you may make a decision and you may have decided that this was the right space for you to be in, the right specialty, and then you go into it and you're in there and you're immersed in it in residency, and then you step out and say, wait a minute, is this really what I want? And I've had a lot of conversations. It's never too late to kind of address those and have those questions, because it is different once you're in residency. So let's talk about this sort of match for a moment. Um, when you apply to college, when you apply to med school, you'll get all of these acceptances and offers, and you kind of sit there and weigh them out and decide. Um, this is residency match is very different. You apply to different programs. You usually decide, and some people are looking at two different specialties. Sometimes they go into it and they're thinking, I'm looking, I really like, I had two applications ready to go, one for OBGYN and one for surgery. I was really struggling with which to do. I ended up, choosing to go forward with OBGYN. And so you apply like you do for everything else, and you apply to all these different residency programs, and it could be across the country, different places, and there's different reasons why you may think you want to do one versus another, residency. And then you interview at those residencies and you meet them, and hear what your graduate medical education is going to be like, what hospitals, what's your patient population, et cetera. And then here's where it differs. You put together a list, you rank one down to, however many you interviewed at, and there may be some that you decided on your trip and your meeting that you'd say, I do not want to go there, and so you wouldn't put them on your list. And you basically rank your list from your top to your bottom, and then you input it into a computer. And the residency programs put top to bottom their list, their rank list of all of the applicants that they saw, and who they want, and they put it on a list and they put it into a computer. And that computer chugs away and has an algorithm, and it spits out on which program has matched which people. And then on one day, you go in, and we just had our match day a few weeks ago. One day, everybody meets, and the first step is they a few days before that they find out, okay, did I match? They don't know where, but did I match? Okay, I matched. Great. Now, 2 days later, they go in and they find out where they match. They open up the envelope and it says, you are going here. So it's very different than anything else. So that match day that we talk about, or where did we match, and where you put on the list and what programs, it's a very different system. In some ways there's positives about it, in some ways there's negatives. It's what our students sort of think about when they're looking at different programs, and what, which one they put 1, 2, and 3. And so that's a unique process. The other thing I was going to mention, because I know that it's come up a lot of different times, we talked about the intern year, we talked about a chief resident, we talked about attending. Let me just go over the nomenclature a little bit for you. So when you start your residency, it's your graduate medical education. And so you match, you decide, let's say, I matched, I'm at UCLA. My first year is my intern year. And depending on which specialty you go to, sometimes it's an intern year that's not part of the core residency. So anesthesia has that. You do an intern year in medicine, you do an intern year in surgery, one of those, transitional years, then that's your intern year. And then your next second year and beyond, so you're done with training, is in anesthesia specifically. We have, a lot of, I believe, neurology is another one of those where you do this intern year in internal medicine, and then you go on and do neurology, right? So OBGYN is not like that. You start your intern year in OBGYN and you continue it until you're done. So you do your intern year, and then, each year, however long the training program is, you heard some of them are 3 years, some of them are 4 years. You go and you step in each of those years. Some have a 4th year, like Dr. Miller mentioned, which you could do as your chief year in pediatrics, where you're sort of like a mini attending. A mini attending is the person that's done training, that oversees, the team, that's the responsible person. You're licensed, you've done your boards, you're an attending physician. That means you're done in practicing medicine. Your chief year for peds or medicine is kind of like that mini attending, and it's that additional year. And you're doing administrative work, you're overseeing the residency. In OB-GYN, your chief year, everybody does a chief year. And what that means is you're chiefing every different service. And so you have to oversee, you're in charge, you're in that sort of mini attending role with your attending above. And so you're taking your junior residents through surgeries with your attending there overseeing. And so a lot of those, it depends on the specialty, how it's set up, but we generally have the intern, the second year, third year, fourth, and depending on, how long the residency is, you can have your chief year. After that, some individuals, and I think Dr. Wheeler was talking about how he did pediatric neurology. So he did an additional training in fellowship. I mentioned that I had done an additional fellowship in OB anesthesia. That's after you're done with your residency training, you may decide that you want to be a subspecialist. You want to really focus in. And for Dr. Wheeler, that was pediatric neurology. And so there's a lot of different specialized training that you do. For me, I did obstetric anesthesia. It's where I focus and where I principally, right now, my clinical work only in obstetric anesthesia. So that's additional time. And I think the overarching message is, each of us had different journeys, but you do what you love, what you're passionate about. Even if you think it's an extra year, 3 years, 4 years, don't look at the time. Just look at what you're passionate about, what you want to do, and the process lends itself to that. So I think I kind of wanted to sort of define those things a little bit so that it makes sense as we're having these questions. So there's lots of questions here. So I want to be able to get to them. I'm going to piece together a really important question, the second part. And if anybody in our panel wants to answer the questions in the chat, we could do that too, so we can get through them in time. One of the things that was mentioned, and I think this is really important and why I wanted to bring it to the group together, and it was the second part of the question. And it had to do with respect to how do we ensure a successful residency experience? The person that was asking the question talked about, unfortunately, I've heard some stories from Black residents specifically who have felt particularly micromanaged, micro and macro rest in their training, but because of their role as a resident, have refrained taking action and fear of backlash and poor reviews. I think this is a really important question to address and acknowledge. And I'm going to open up. I have some thoughts, but I really would love for the panel to talk about that. So I'll open it up to the group.
So we could spend the rest of our time together just on this particular topic. I did write a comment myself in the chat regarding this. But first of all, we live, unfortunately, in a world where we are surrounded by these experiences every single day, and there is no walk of life and no profession where we're not going to experience it. I hate to say that, but and medicine is not immune. But that is no reason not to pursue your dream. So I'll just start with that. I will say that there is a heightened awareness of the responsibility that programs have to create a comfortable and equitable environment for their trainees. It's required by the certifying agencies that accredit it and certify training programs. And there is growing personal responsibility being taken by leadership in these training programs. So a lot of work is being done, more so than I can say that I ever experienced in my training years. And so I think this is a great time to be entering medicine and entering into these programs, because there's a lot of support for changing that environment. So I would say, uh, trust in the survival skills that you use to get to where you are and that you'll continue to use as you go forward because you're going to need them. And residency is no different. But I do think that as you explore different programs, you'll find that there is a community with a sincere wish and hope, um, not just hope, but a sincere activist approach to changing how things work. At our institution at UCSF, this is taken very, very, very seriously, and students actually have a lot of support for speaking up, and there's a whole program and a system that responds to that, to when those issues come to fore. So that's what I would say about that.
And I agree with Dr. Miller that we could spend there could be a whole session on this. I 100% agree with everything that Dr. Miller said, that we can't escape it. It's there every day in life. But there is a very strong advocacy and activist in many of the institutions, and zero tolerance for it. But does it still happen? Yes. Does it happen in some of the, you know, particularly in what I call the perioperative space, so the surgical specialties, the anesthesia, even OBGYN, and to be honest, that also, no surprise, is the areas where we see the lowest numbers of individuals that are underrepresented in medicine. Our BL&A communities, our Black, Latinx, and Native American communities, and I think for me, I continue to push in the role that I have within anesthesia, my role as an academic faculty member, and it's critical for us to continue to advocate for more diversity within these specialties, because it's not going to change until we continue to promote more diversity in these specialties. And it's imperative for our patients. As much as it is so important for our patients to have providers that look like them in the communities, in the clinics, it is so critical for someone who needs to have surgery to have a surgeon that looks like them, speak to them, and go over and advocate. It's important for them to have an anesthesiologist that looks like them, that understands their prospective communities. I think it was so critical in COVID, intensive care physicians, and having families that come from communities that were similar to their experience, to have that diversity within our critical care physicians. And I think that we have to continue. It is increasing in diversity, but still short of that. And that is one of the things that I continue to advocate and work for. And we have programs, actually UCF and UCLA are two sites where we're actually doing some work on developing interventions for the microaggressions in the OR, changing the culture and climate. Changing culture is really challenging, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to do it. It's on our front line, and what we're working on. And so I think that's, I would encourage you, if you are interested in surgery, if you're interested in ear, nose, throat, interested in plastics, interested in trauma, do not let the stories, they're real, but push forward, and you will have allies and you will have advocacy, because it's important for you to do what you're passionate about. And I think Dr. Gojic said, what makes you excited to wake up in the morning, for a trauma, if that is where you're like, this is where I want to be there, I want to go. Don't let that system that's been set up to prevent you from doing what you're passionate about. I mean, that's sort of where I feel it's so critical for us to stand up, and you will have allies. As Dr. Miller said, it is, we have made major changes from even when I was training, that there is the tolerance of this is less and less. It still doesn't mean it's not happening. I'll put within the chat and a piece that I just published in the New England Journal that talks about aversive racism. And so I put that in there, not to like showcase that I think it's a good article, but I'm biased. But I think it really indicates that the New England Journal was willing to publish this piece. And it is unapologetic. It's provoking. Did it get some backlash from from commenters? Absolutely. But I think it sort of gives you an idea of where we're at as a medical community, that this journal published it. So, but I think it's something that it's a good read for you all, because this is going on still, but we're working on dismantling it. So I'll stop there if anybody wants to add anything. And I know there's more questions, and we have some folks that have their hand up. So.
Thank you, Dr. Lucero. I just want to highlight something that Dr. Miller named that's so important to keep in mind, is that medicine is part of society, and it's part of American society, and American society is racist. Let's, name it. Let's use the words, right? And so medicine is not excluded from that, unfortunately. And it breaks your heart when you enter it, because you think you're working with like-minded folks. You think they've got the values but they are within American society, right? And so there are experiences that are consistent with the racism of American society within medicine. And it is folks who publish articles in the New England who bring to the attention to the medical community that we should be holding ourselves to a higher standard, that are pushing to change that, but it is within an existing society. And so I think it's very important, as you enter this culture, this new culture, that you find allies, safe spaces. SNMA was a lifesaver to me when I was in medical school, having organizations that really allow you to name the things that are hard and not have you question your experiences, and feel seen and heard and validated, and get through it to provide that essential care that you will be able to provide as a melanated physician. So thank you for the question.
I want to call out on our folks that have their hand up. So Dana, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, hi, Dr. Lucero. Thank you to all of our panelists. So I actually wanted to go back to what you were talking about when you were explaining the process of matching. So you had said that you match at your first pick, and then your first pick kind of picks these group of students. So my question was, is it exclusively your first pick? Is there a possibility that you will ever match at your second or third, or, down the list? And then another question I wanted to pose for our students, I see there's a lot of conversation about being a competitive applicant for medical school, but what if you don't match? What is that process like, and what happens after that?
Yeah, no. So, can you all hear me, or am I? Okay, sorry, I think I got frozen. So this happens, it's the Zoom world. So you don't necessarily get your first, you make your rank list, and you won't necessarily match in your first. That's, obviously your hope, but you put on your list any place that you're really, would be happy to go to. It, sometimes, 1, 2, and 3, you'd be happy at any of those, and it's hard to pick which one's 1, 2, and 3, but you can, you put on that list. If you have 20 schools, you may, and number 20th, you may match at. So that's how the system works. So let me go off video so I'm not continually frozen. The program actually also puts their rank list, and sometimes the program doesn't match even, right? So there are certain programs that they don't fill their spots. Maybe they have 10 spots for residents for their intern class, and they don't match all 10, right? So it's a process that both groups, the program and the individual, are putting together these lists. So if you don't match, and that does happen sometimes, what you end up doing is that few days before, when you find out, did I match? The folks that didn't match, they will go through what we call a SOAP process. And so they'll look at which are unfilled spots. Sometimes they may be like a preliminary spot where you do an intern year and then you go through the match for another specialty. And you look at sort of the uh, you'll do it with your Dean of Student Affairs. They'll walk you through the SOAP process. Sometimes it's, you didn't apply to enough programs. If it's a very competitive specialty, plastics is one of these programs. It's incredibly competitive. And so you have to apply to a lot of programs. Neurosurgery, incredibly competitive. Applied a lot of programs. If you didn't apply to enough, then that might have been the reason. Dermatology is another, and orthopedic surgery. And so I'm going to come back to, the other question of competitive programs, what to do for those. So there is a process where you can match, maybe either for a year, or if there's a program that didn't fill. So like I mentioned, there was programs, maybe they had 10 spots, they only got 9, you can jump into that program. And so there is a process to go through. You can you either do an intern year and then go through the match for whatever specialty, or you decide, that you find an unfilled spot. Competitive programs, those ones I mentioned, plastics, the orthopedics, derm, those are very, neurosurgery, those are very competitive. Each of them have things that they particularly look for candidates. So for example, neurosurgery, many of the neurosurgery programs want to see that you've published papers, you've done research, they want to, you might want to be doing, for many of them, what we call sub-Is or sub-internships. You go to their program and you do an elective where you're working with the interns on neurosurgery, and you're doing like the sub-internship, and you kind of function as an intern. So they want to see how you fit into the team. All of that is I have commentary about. If you read my article, you'll know it's a little bit, I have issues with right fit kind of thing, because that's some of the essence. We don't standard fit into specialties because we don't look like these individuals. We don't come from the same experiences. That's something we have to change over the internet sensible. I'm going to go off video here for a second. That'll help. So I think that when you're at a competitive when you want to match into a competitive specialty, I would not say don't decide, oh, I'm not, don't ever tell yourself I'm not good enough to get that. Just find out all the information of what you need to do and set yourself up. Look for, there are mentors that are from the BLNA community that are in those specialties. Search them out and say, I am interested in going into this. Can you help me? Tell me what are the things that I need to do? Have them connect you, with individuals. Use your network, and that's, this is part of your network, right? Use your network. I'm going to pause here to allow the other panelists to say other things and add to that.
So the only other thing I would add to that is that medical schools have very strong residency and career advising programs, and they are made up of faculty from each of these disciplines. So if you're interested in one of these so-called competitive programs, and they're competitive primarily because they haven't expanded their spots, and they just I don't know, I think there's a little bit of an ego there that they want to be considered hard to get into, but I won't editorialize. But at any rate, if you're interested in neurosurgery, say, connect with the neurosurgery faculty and career advisor and get to know them, work with them, and have them help shepherd you through the process, and realize that you probably do have to start early, because in order to get to build your profile in a way that is most likely to help you be competitive, as they say, or successful in the match in neurosurgery. Because they do want you to publish, they do want you to do research, they do want you to publish, and they have all these hurdles because they're trying to triage, hundreds of very, very qualified applicants. So this is not an issue of whether you are qualified to be one of those subspecialists. This is an issue of playing the game and leveraging yourself to get into one of those programs. And so you do it with help. You do it with help. You can't do this by yourself.
And, I'll just mention that I'm so excited this year that for the first time, at least in my recent history, more than 30 African-American graduating students matched into neurosurgery. So it is extraordinarily exciting. Yeah. And so they're in programs across the country. One program has 2 match, that's Mayo and Rochester. One of my mentees matched at UC Davis. So it's very exciting to see that happening. But it is so critical that people are interested in so-called these highly competitive, that they do start early. And I talk to students in the 3rd and 4th year saying, well, I'm thinking about dermatology. I was like, well, you may be a little late. I wouldn't discourage them, but just to be real with them about what I know people in college are doing research and building on their resume for dermatology, even before medical school. So anyway, that's the experience, but we are at least being successful. I can't help but to think that some of the success this year is a result of what we've been going through as a society this last year and a half as well. Some of the awakening, some of the other programs and conversations being had.
Thank you, Dr. Wheeler, and agree. I think that's one of the things that we argue is that for many of us that are part of the BLNA community and are also first gen, don't know the process. I mean, we're being asked to do things that we're behind because the system was set up to make us behind, and so we have to these programs, if they truly want to be diverse and care for a diverse population, they need to acknowledge that they've set up these certain rules that are not necessary to be a good neurosurgeon. You don't necessarily need to start when you're an undergrad doing this research. You need to really think about that certain communities didn't have access to this knowledge and the individuals. So it is going to be a long process, but these discussions, demystifying this and communicating to these programs and requiring them are so important to say to them, to really call out these barriers that they have set up artificially that impact. So on one hand, you can't say, we really want to have a diverse workforce, but then not change the rules that have created these barriers. And so I think those conversations, these 2 groups are coming together and having these conversations more. We're still not there yet, but we're pushing further and further closer so that we can see these changes happening. I want to, Adriana has her hand up, and so I want to call on her. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, I wanted to thank all of the panelists for being here today. I am Andriana Wright. I'm a junior attending Grambling State University, biology major. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. My question is, I've heard that residency takes up a lot of time. And so how do you make time for the people, activities, and hobbies that are most important in your life?
Well, I'll start that one. Residency does take a lot of time. When I trained, we didn't have hours restriction that are in place now for several years. There's a restriction now of 80 hours per week averaged over the month, which is one of the things we have to follow for all residency and fellowship programs. But what I always say to pre-med, undergrad students, et cetera, this whole journey is part of life. It's not like life stops and you go to med school or you go to residency, et cetera. It's all part of life. So you have to begin to balance all the requirements, the activities, the learning, the studying, etc., as part of life. And when I mentioned earlier, having been in the program where we did the first 2 years of med school in 15 months, I developed a program where for each week, I only spent about 2 to 3 hours social per week. That was how I arranged my schedule to get through the rigor of the program. It was worth it for me. Some people didn't want to do that kind of commitment. Some people didn't make it through med school, and some people did an extra year. All these things come into play. So when you are committed to what you want to do, I think I enjoyed every part of the training, every part of the journey, even though you get extraordinarily tired and exhausted. It's a good tired and a good exhaustion because you're doing and you're learning and training for what you want to do in life. And when you get in practice and you're presented with a patient, I also say to trainees and residents in fellowship, there are lots of peripheral brains these days with our phones and all kinds of things. But when you're in the midst of a crisis, you don't have time to go to those. You've got to know what you need to do to stabilize a patient or to save a patient's life. So there's nothing to substitute for the learning and for the experience. So it is critically important. And so it's just part of life. It's part of the waking up, as was said earlier, for the gunshot wound coming into the emergency room, for the person who is, DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, any number of things that you've got to respond to. And so if you sort of skate it through and don't have the full experience and knowledge, boy, oh boy, that won't serve you well.
So I'd like to echo that as well. I mean, you're choosing a career or you're choosing to train in a academic area of your interest. And so if you're interested in this, then you don't mind spending the time to do the deep dive to learn the things that you need to learn in order to be good at what you do. And you enjoy the learning. At the same time, you do need to figure out what non-academic life activities you should engage in that will provide that balance that you need to be whole and to be in order to support your deep dive efforts into a rigorous training program. I have my own, and that's when I started getting interested in mind-body activities, and I've found that works for me, and I still practice Tai Chi. I do it very regularly, and 5 minutes a day is all I need to provide the balance that I need to feel whole and to stay engaged. So that's just, but you have to find yours. I also was going to share that I got married right at the end of graduating from college, and we started our family my third year of medical school. So I had a baby as a third going into fourth year medical student, which at that time was unusual, but I made it work. And I made it work because it felt like the right thing to do. And I needed to sit down. You always have to make decisions about how you spend your time and where are your supports, where are your resources, engage in them and make your way. Don't be afraid of hard work, guys.
Okay, Dr. Lasario, I think we're about time to wrap it up. What do you?
All right. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to wrap up here. You all had some great questions. I think if there's additional questions you want to chat with us, I know my email. I'm happy to put my email in the chat. I do have an outreach program at UCLA. So if you're interested, and great, yeah, I see we're putting our emails in there. So I'm going to do that. It's been wonderful. Had a great discussion. You all have asked wonderful questions in the chat and live. you are the future, and we are so excited to see you, changing the dynamic of medicine and changing and diversifying the physician workforce. We need you. Our communities need you. And I think we will, it makes me feel really just overjoyed to know that the future is going to be quite bright with you all in it and being physicians. And we have many students that have been involved in this program that are medical students now and residents, etc. So please keep working hard. Again, I'll echo what Dr. Miller said. Don't be afraid to work hard. I love my job. I have the best job in the whole world, and you all will be able to do these amazing things that we've done, and it will be for you very satisfying. So thank you again so much. I'm going to put my email in here, and I'll turn it back over to Stelfana.
Okay, thank you. Oh my God, that was just great. Thank you, panel. Thank you for your time and great information. Students, check those emails out. As we have said in previous ones, if you are going to email them, put something in the subject line that says doctors on board or something to help identify you. And also always put your name, complete name, because a lot of people are used to texting, and a phone number. It really helps in your communication, and it helps to help you expand your network. If you're, sending an email to someone that could be so valuable to you in your journey. So with that said, I think we're going to take a couple of minutes. And 5 minutes, it is, listen, we come back, Tracy and Carolyn, what do you think we should come back in?
We can come back in about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. What time would that be?
That would be, let's say 11:15. So a little less than 5 minutes.
11:15. Okay.
But I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. And when I open up the breakout rooms, it's going to assign you to one of two breakout rooms, one for future women doctors, one for future men doctors. I want to apologize in advance if I have put you in the wrong room. Just come on back to the main room and we'll get you in the room of your choice. But I have tried to assign you as a male identifying or a female identifying room. And there's a few folks who I wasn't sure just because of name, and there wasn't a she, him, her pronoun in your name, and you didn't have your picture on the screen. So if you are not assigned, I'll just need you to drop in the chat which room you would prefer to go to. But
just to add, please know that whatever room you decide that you want to go to, we're fine with that. So understand that, okay? We just kind of use those two because it was easier to manage two breakout rooms like that. But feel free to go with whichever one that you decide, okay?
And I'll be waiting for you here to change you around wherever you want to go.
And so will I.
And we'll be back. So we'll be back at 11:15. We've got about 6 minutes to bio break, and see you in a few.
Great group of surgeons. I am an obstetrician gynecologist. And have done surgery on hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 patients. And we have with us Dr. Derek Taylor, a retired general surgeon from the Kaiser Permanente group, Dr. Amanda Williams, OBGYN. So we got another OBGYN, and she's at Kaiser Permanente, and Dr. Warren Strudwick. He's an orthopedic surgeon and does sports medicine. So without any further ado, I'd like to start with, and I left off an important surgeon, I'm sorry. Dr. Refugio Gonzalez is a general surgeon, and he does minimally invasive and robotic surgery at Sutter East Bay. So in order to kick it off, why don't we have Dr. Gonzalez give us a little statement for the next 3 to 4 minutes about what he does and why he likes what he does.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Refugio Gonzalez. I'm a general surgeon with Sutter East Bay Medical Group. I work out of Oakland and Berkeley Alta Bates Medical Center. I'm trained in general surgery trained over at UC San Francisco East Bay program here locally. Although I am trained as a general surgeon, general surgery is a very wide specialty with a lot of different niches. And there are different subspecialties that you could do within general surgery. I basically did general surgery and went on to grandfather myself as a minimally invasive surgeon. I actually was one of the first in general surgery to start using the robotic surgery platform known as the Da Vinci surgery within my practice in general surgery. And this platform has really taken off over the last 10 years and has been utilized in many different areas within general surgery and also within thoracic surgery. I use it mainly in my practice is a large amount of complex abdominal hernia repairs. I also use it for the bread and butter general surgery, such as removing gallbladders, some complex bowel surgery, and it has really evolved over the last 10 years and taken off to a point where it's slowly becoming standard of care. It's really fascinating field. I love general surgery. I've always been someone who has used my hands to do things since I was a child, and I for sure chose the correct field. And even though it is very long hours and can be challenging at times, it's very fulfilling to be a general surgeon.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez.
Al, put your camera on.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Next up, we have Dr. Derek Taylor, general surgeon from Kaiser Permanente. Dr. Taylor?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. So
The floor
my
is
name is
yours.
Derek Taylor, and I am a general surgeon, recently retired. I trained in New York City, and during my training, did a lot of general surgery. Also did a lot of trauma. I was basically trained as a trauma surgeon, which eventually, after my training, brought me out here to California. But also during my training, also did a lot of vascular surgery, cancer surgery, did some kidney transplants, and did a lot of cardiac bypass surgery assisting, the surgeons. So when I finished, I was brought out here. I was in Kaiser Redwood City, which East Palo Alto was having, was the #1 murder capital in the country. And so we were seeing multiple gunshot wounds literally every day. And so we did that 5 or 6 years until they sort of cleaned that out and East Palo Alto became a little bit gentrified. But as a general surgeon, I used to tell people, ask me what did I do, and basically during my time, I used to tell them I did everything except brain and bones and OBGYN. Subsequently, general surgery has been sort of subdivided with a lot of other subspecialists coming in. But a general surgeon basically does everything except, as I mentioned, bone and heart and brain. And so, it's a great experience, done sort of thousands of surgery. And still, I still like mostly, trauma surgery. It's a very busy, you're very busy, and it can get to be quite traumatic at times when, multiple gunshot wounds or multiple car accidents come in, and you've got to sort of triage and try to take care of all the people you can without letting anyone, fall by the wayside. At this point, what I would recommend to people going into general surgery, probably particularly in the Bay Area or any major metropolitan area, in addition to doing your general surgery, you might want to also specialize in either cancer surgery or minimal invasive surgery, as was said before, or have some sort of specialty item which will make you stand out a little bit different than the rest of the well-trained surgeons that you'll find, particularly in major metropolitan areas. So that's a brief synopsis for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Taylor.
Sure.
Next up, Dr. Amanda Williams, OBGYN from Kaiser Permanente.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Amanda Williams. As Dr. Brooks just said, I am a OBGYN at Kaiser Permanente based in the Oakland Medical Center. That is about half of what I do. The other half of what I do is that I run my department. So I'm the chief OB in the East Bay for Kaiser Permanente. And then my third job is as the assistant chair of the chiefs of OBGYN for Northern California. And meaning I oversee what goes on with pregnancy care for all of the 15 medical centers in California. And if I go through that level of detail is that it's important, and I'm happy to talk about it more later, to think about what are the unique skills that you want to develop. So do you want to be sort of laser focused on your technical skills? And you've got to develop good technical skills. And if you have interests in systems, policy, design, care delivery design, those are things that you can be developing at the same time. And one of the reasons that OBGYN is such a great field is that, to be honest, OB and GYN are pretty different. But of course, you're taking care of reproductive health across the lifespan. And because reproductive health is so much integrated into our society, into policies, into laws, and there's so much a sort of assault on reproductive rights, it's an area where if you're interested also in advocacy, also in doing strategy, that it's a place where you can bring a lot of different interests together. But when you're in the OR, and I was in the OR till 9 o'clock last night, and you are in that flow state, nothing else matters in the world. And you have, you can call in that ability to be totally focused and using what you know, and then also the creative part of your brain to solve whatever the hemorrhage or the problem is that you're trying to solve. So part of the reason I love OBGYN so much is that you have the ability to do some medicine in the office with patients, to do surgery, and also you can do systems, policy, advocacy as well.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate that. Next up, we have Dr. Warren Strudwick. He's an orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine physician and has been taking care of many of our athletic teams over many years. And so next up, Dr. Strudwick.
Hi, everybody. So the men are familiar with what I do. I am an orthopedic surgeon, as Dr. Brooks stated, and I concentrate on sports medicine. As an orthopedic surgeon, you take care of the bones, muscles, ligaments, and the soft tissues of the body, which is called the musculoskeletal system. And most orthopedists are surgeons and perform surgeries on the multiple body parts like shoulders and knees, backs, feet, hands, elbows, and the neck. Most of us are specialized. We do certain body parts. I specialize in operating on the shoulders and knees. I take care of all kinds of patients. I take care of everyday patients who hurt themselves in their everyday activities. I take care of weekend warriors. I've taken care of pro athletes, college athletes, high school athletes, and Olympic athletes over many, many years. What I've learned over the years is that if you do happen to enjoy what you're doing as a career, it becomes much more meaningful for you. There are a lot of avenues that you can take when you're taking care of athletes, from a mentorship with the young athletes, to sort of social activism in the athletic community. And by the way, you can be in sports medicine and not be a surgeon. There are many, many ways of being in sports medicine, from a family practice standpoint, from internal medicine, even cardiology. You can be an athletic trainer. You can be a massage therapist. You can be a chiropractor. And there are a few other ways that you can get into sports medicine. And I think it's a very, very rewarding career.
Thank you, Dr. Strudwick. I'd like to see if we can have some questions. I was looking in the chat, and maybe someone can ask us a question or two about the interesting array of things that surgeons do. Any questions out there about? Here's your opportunity. Pick the brain of the surgeons.
Al, I have a question that came to me. I want to kick off. Maybe this will help. Is how long does it take for you to become either general or sports medicine doctor, orthopedic? How long is it? 5 years after medical school for general surgery, or for orthopedic surgery or OB? What's the time frame in residency, in other words, and fellowship? If someone could explain that. I got that question.
Right.
Dr. Strudwick.
Well, let's see. I went to undergrad school 4 years, and then went to medical school 4 more years. And then I did an internship in general surgery 1 year. And then I did residency in orthopedic surgeon 4 years. And then I did a year of fellowship where I just operated on knees. And then I became a full-fledged doc, as such, practicing as a sports medicine doctor. Some people take 5 years of medical school. They do a year of research. And some people don't do a fellowship after residency, which I did. So it's a relatively long road. I was not practicing as a sports medicine physician until I was 31 years old.
And the other question is, did you do them all at the same place, your residency, or were there different medical schools or residency programs?
Well, you can, and there are some people who go all the way through undergrad, medical school, residency. There are some people who do that. I was fortunate enough to have a diverse education. So I did my undergrad school at Brown University, and then I went to Howard University for medical school, and then did my residency at Stanford, and then did my fellowship in France.
Okay.
So that's a pretty varied and diverse education that I'm pretty thankful for.
Dr. Gonzalez, what about you?
So I went to UCLA for undergrad for 4 years, and then I did residency here in the East Bay at one of the UCSF programs based out of Highland Hospital, and I was there for 6 years. But the general surgery training can be anywhere from 5 to 7 years, where you train as a general surgeon, takes 5 years, and about half the people in my program did research, and research is done sometimes as an avenue to open up yourself into going into a teaching position. You may become the rules expert, who knows, on doing some type of advanced surgery and want to follow something that you're doing research on. And then many people within general surgery also then go on to do a fellowship in the various subspecialties like colorectal surgery, plastic surgery. I did general surgery, but like I said before, you end up finding kind of a niche, what you like. I taught myself with knowing the basics already, how to do minimally invasive surgery, and jumped on to doing robotics, and have kind of done that without having had to do an actual fellowship in minimally invasive surgery. Although I think that now those things are being less and less. Now most people are doing fellowships, and we can get into the different pros and cons about that. I mean, as people within general surgery subspecialize more, that, in my opinion, can develop some shortcomings with more rural communities that require general surgeons. But as an individual basis, it may be more fulfilling to do a subspecialty and a fellowship to be able to narrow your skills and make yourself more marketable.
Mm-hmm. Dr.
There's a question in the chat. What are some of the stereotypes associated with general surgeons? Are they all throwing instruments and yelling, or tell us some of the stereotypes?
And one other thing, could you address, because this has come up again in terms of Latinx physicians, as surgeons, what kind of challenges you were faced and how did you overcome them? Can you kind of combine that together?
Is that question for me?
Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, there are a lot of challenges, many of which you're not even well aware of sometimes. I can tell you, I practice here in Oakland, and I can maybe answer this question by giving a couple anecdotes of what my experience has been here like. I treat patients of every color, social, economic class, and one of the reasons I love practicing in Oakland is I can literally have a homeless person on the operating table taking care of their hernia because they came through our ER 1 hour, and the next hour I'm taking care of a owner of a hedge fund in San Francisco, and or even someone from the ACE management team, which is awesome. I'm able to take care of everyone and people of all colors and different geographic backgrounds. There are challenges with regards to, I think, there are many politics in hospitals, and many times you're not just a surgeon, you have to take certain roles in leadership. And sometimes being a person of color, you can be viewed as less than, even though they're not directly telling you. But little things come up where you notice that you're being treated sometimes as a second-class citizen at times, and you really have to stand up for yourself. And even though I wouldn't, you don't want to be thinking about these things on a regular basis, you are aware of them, whether you like it or not. I mean, I one time had a patient who I walked in the room and I was just trying to take good care of her. And she looked at me and says, "That's so awesome that, a Mexican can actually be here and be a surgeon and be able to practice here in Berkeley." And maybe she had like good intentions with that, but I had to take a step back and then think about myself. And I guess I am Mexican. And as I do my job every single day, I don't even think about that. I just do my job to the best of my knowledge. And I would just advise everybody to do just that. Do the best you can for who you are as an individual, never thinking about that, but be aware of it at times. And maybe at times you may have to, give yourself some meditation as to what it means to be a person of color, and you are just as good, if not better. And in my opinion, sometimes better to be the fact that you got here. You had to go through certain challenges, and never let that be an obstacle. Use that as a strength to just move yourself forward. And there's a lot of people who've already paved the path for you. I will tell you that when I was accepted to my program here in the East Bay, the surgeon who accepted me is a very well-known African-American surgeon who I loved very much, Dr. Claude Organ. And he was someone who really followed along that. He was really that surgeon that everybody stereotypes, a very hard person, that strong personality, and really really picked at you and made sure that you had a strong core. And he was just awesome professor. And those kind of people have already kind of paved the way for all of us. And I think that it's great to look at them and use that as a strength going forward.
There's another question in the chat. Someone asked, what can we do now to train ourselves for the long hours of surgery and using your hands for long periods of time?
Good question, Amanda.
I would actually push back and say you don't want to try to overextend yourself like that. What you want to do is learn how to keep your mind and heart open so that you can be in those spaces and not let it sort of take you over, and really think about how can I be in control of my breath? How can I be in control of my thoughts as opposed to the physical stamina? Now, that said, I was a runner for a long time. I work out a lot. There are lots of things I do that are sort of match the intensity of my training. But probably what helps me the most is learning how to take care of myself, and to take care of my thoughts.
A couple of things I'd like to add. There's been some studies that show that people play a lot of video games. It helps with your hand-eye coordination, and you tend to be a little bit better in the surgery room. The other thing I would suggest is trying to learn how to be ambidextrous. If you can cut and use both hands, it's very useful. It's very difficult to do at first, but if you can be ambidextrous, and again, the studies have shown that people who do a lot of video games, it helps with your hand-eye coordination, and so that's been shown. So those are two things you can might try to do. And do a lot of it in terms of, when you're in your training, try to do as many cases as you can with the professors and attending, so you learn how to do it the right way. That's why residency, where you go, you do your residency and your internship is so important. If you're in a program that is inundated with just cases, and you've got good professors, almost by osmosis, you're going to be pretty good. Where if you go to a program that has just the minimal amount of cases and teachers that don't train and teach, when you come out, it's almost impossible to get better, because when you're on your own, nobody's going to come to your assistance unless you're in a fellowship or a residency program, unless you have a good partner that you've aligned with when you finish the training. So those are some recommendations.
Al, I have a question.
Yeah,
that came up.
My internet is unstable, so I'm.
Oh, okay. The question came up is, please describe your toughest surgery. What was the toughest surgery that you had, and how did it work out? This is to all the panels, briefly.
I have one. I don't know if you can hear me.
Your toughest one.
My toughest one. My toughest one was a situation where a patient arrived in my office, and she was near term pregnant, and she was due, and I went to check her to see if her cervix was dilated, and unfortunately a hemorrhage occurred, and I was in my office with a patient hemorrhaging. It was the scariest moment in my life of practice as an OB doctor. We're used to hemorrhage, but usually it occurs when the patient's in the hospital. We had to rush the patient through the back entrance to Alta Bates. We had to rush up to labor and delivery. Someone had to call the OR team and get them ready. And when we got there, we were able to do what we call a crash cesarean section, in which we don't stop in details as we go through. We go through fairly rapidly. And with just some luck and, maybe experience of having done the surgery hundreds of times before, we did an emergency C-section and we saved the mother and the baby. And it was one of the most drastic moments in my career, but it came out well. But it in all the years of prep before prepared me probably to handle that situation. I don't know if anybody else has one of those moments where your whole life passes in front of you and the patient's life passes in front of you.
Dr. Williams? Toughest surgery, and how did it come out?
I will say probably the hardest surgery that I've done in recent memory is repeat C-section on a 400-pound woman who also had an 18-centimeter fibroid tumor on her uterus. So a fibroid tumor is like a muscle mass that's like this big. So the baby's head was half the size of the tumor. So we had to go through all the scar tissue, through all the fat from her being 400 pounds around her to find and get the baby out. And it was an incredible adventure. But I think one of the things that really hard surgeries remind you of is that you have usually, if you have the opportunity to prepare, a great team around you. And it reminds you in surgery how important teamwork is and really honoring the work of your surgical techs, your nurses, your residents, because you never want to go down alone. Like if it's going to be a really bad situation, other excellent people in there with you. Now, I have the privilege of serving on the California Pregnancy Associated Mortality Review. So I review every pregnant woman who dies in the state of California of a bleeding death. And one of the things that we see time and again is one, people doing complex surgeries in under-resourced places. So to try to get folks where there are bigger teams. And then also people's egos getting in the way and not asking for help. So in terms of themes,
it's the ultimate team sport.
Yeah, surgery is very much a team sport.
Dr. Gonzalez.
So I would echo that surgery is a team sport.
But your toughest surgery.
Okay. So the toughest surgery that I've had was actually as a senior resident, and just like Dr. Taylor said, we train in kind of a vast different cases that we do. And I was doing what's called a left upper lobe lobectomy on a patient. We're removing a cancer from the left lung. And as we were taking it from the main pulmonary artery, which is the vessel that comes out of the heart, it tore. And then when that happens, the heart's pumping and the vessel retracts. And we tried everything, even to try to put the patient on bypass and put what's called a Foley catheter and plug up the artery and save the patient, but we lost the patient on the table. And this was somebody who had walked in. I had pre-opt, who I've seen as a preoperative evaluation. I had talked to them in the office. They walked in with their family. And it's always very, very difficult to lose someone on the operating table and have to come out and tell them that they died, and completely unexpected. And there was not much you could do. That probably was the toughest, even though I was still in training. And there is a little more forgiveness that takes place when you're under the wings of somebody else, but it was very difficult even then.
Okay. And Dr. Taylor, I know you have some good ones.
Yeah, there's two cases that I was involved in that comes into mind. One with a patient coming in with an axe in his chest and his heart, and one with an axe in his skull. Those two, but the probably the case that I remember the most, and I was only tangentially involved, was actually an OBGYN case. Apparently a woman was delivering breech, meaning instead of head first, the baby was coming out feet first. And they were delivering and they couldn't get, and so the baby came out feet first and they couldn't get the head out. And and they couldn't get the head out and they couldn't get the body back in, and then they called the surgeons to try to assist, and that was, you know, I won't get into the gory details, but that was fairly traumatic. You know, probably the most traumatic thing I think I've seen. So,
did they make it?
No, the baby did not make it. No.
Okay. All right. And wow, that's a closer. Okay, yeah. Dr. Strudwick.
Well, I've been in a lot of cases that during the case, orthopedists, we put people back together. Okay, they're broken, we put them back together, and sometimes you get in the case and you don't know exactly how you're gonna put them back together, and it takes sometimes a little bit of creativity, and so it's those moments when you've done everything that the book says that you do, and that's still not working, that makes the case the hardest. And so then you have to use whatever knowledge you have, whatever base you have, and go on from there with a little bit of creativity. But I got to say that probably the worst case for me, if you want to talk about a worst, it's yes, not a worst outcome.
Hardest.
But I finished my fellowship in knee surgery and came over here and started working in San Francisco as a surgeon. And it was my first anterior cruciate ligament reconstruction that I was doing by myself. And it was at a hospital called Mount Zion Hospital in San Francisco. And so here I was, big time surgeon. I'm now a surgeon and I'm going to do this case all by myself, and I know how to do it. And we use this thing called arthroscopy that puts water inside the joint and inflates the joint and allows us to do the surgery through two little small incisions. And so there's a lot of water flowing. And so the longer the case goes, the more water flows. And sometimes the water comes out of the knee into a packet that's around the patient. But sometimes that packet gets filled and it overflows and the water overflows. So here I am, my first case in this hospital. They didn't know me. And I'm working on this patient, and the water is just flowing everywhere. I mean, the water is flowing, out of the case, out of the knee, is flowing onto the floor. And literally, there was so much water on the floor, it tripped the circuits in the hospital and knocked all the electricity out in the hospital. Okay, so I'm sitting there operating, and it's taking me hours to do this operation by myself, the first one that I've done myself. And that has to be the hardest case ever. The patient had a great outcome, but that was my hardest case.
When you say by yourself, you mean there was a team, but you were the only doctor. Is that what you're saying?
I was the only surgeon. Yes.
Oh, okay. So yeah, okay.
I had no assistant. Of course, I had a nurse and a scrub tech and everyone circulating, and their mouths were wide open when the water started flowing, and then the electricity in the hospital went off. It was quite a scene.
Al, I have another question that came out. What consists of the team for surgeons? Who's in the team? Who is it? Is it besides you? Who else do you have with you in the operating room? What's the team like? What are the positions?
We have the operating room tech, and that's a key. We have the anesthesiologist providing anesthesia. We have a circulating nurse who can leave the room and go and get instruments, etc. Many times in GYN cases, I had an assistant surgeon, although nowadays a lot of cases don't use another board-certified OB/GYN to assist at surgery. But when I practiced, we did, and many times we still do. And then you have the whole team that's in the pre-op testing area and the post-op area. So those people get in the pre-op, get patients ready for surgery, and then the post-op team takes over in the recovery room. So it takes a huge team, and think about everything has to be sterilized, and there's a unit downstairs that does the sterilization, or there's a sterilization unit in the operating room. So literally, if you add up everybody, it's a huge number of people, and not to mention the patients going up to the floor post-operatively and managed by the nurses in the post-op unit. where they've been operated on, and then they leave the post-op unit and they go to a room in the hospital. Again, you have staff, you have nurses helping to care for the patient. So it's quite a large number of people in any hospital setting, and that are part of the team. I don't want to leave them out.
Okay, all right. Do I have another question that came up? Successful, right? And then he proceeded. What? I don't know about that question.
There's a question about CRNAs.
Yeah, I see the CRNA. Can someone who wants to speak about CRNA, are they trained by anesthesiologists? And what are their roles for a reason? Whoever wrote that. Okay, I don't understand it, but anyway. CRNAs, okay? Yeah. Somebody want to address that?
Well, CRNA is a nurse anesthetist. And,
right, what are we asking about? Okay, go on.
And so, so when you operate, a lot of times you need general anesthesia, and most people associate that with an anesthesiologist that puts you to sleep and wakes you up. And CRNAs have been around a while, and these are nurses who go on and get a advanced skill set that allows them to put patients to sleep and to wake them up. And quite often, initially, they worked as sort of assistants to the anesthesiologist. And then, they proceeded on as they, skills got really good to become, I don't know, for a better word, a junior anesthesiologist or a practitioner who can put patients to sleep and wake them up on their own without the immediate presence of an anesthesiologist. And so that's what a CRNA is.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I have a question that came to me was, although you're not supposed to ask this, but can someone describe the range of salaries after, say, 5 years, or starting salaries for a surgeon? And what are the ranges? They want to know kind of a little bit about salaries.
This nigga said I get money, period.
Okay, all right. Okay. Right. Go on.
If I can throw out a range, just because it's part of what we do is hiring. We used a market-driven process to hire physicians, whatever their specialty is. So we look at what the national numbers are, and then we look at what they are in California. And so it's the range can be, from about 300,000 up to 800,000 or 900,000, depend obviously on the specialty. Neurosurgeons get more highly compensated, probably one of the highest compensations, but there are actually orthopedic surgeons who, depending on their specialty and where they practice, who may make even more than that. So there's a lot of variation, but the contracts are usually vetted by the medical hospital attorneys, and we follow state guidelines, I should say, and national guidelines on salaries. So it's hard to give you a specific number.
And if I can piggyback that what was said, a lot of it it's basically economics, the law of supply and demand. A lot of people would be surprised to find out that generally California doctors and surgeons make less money than other surgeons in other parts of the country where there are major shortages of surgeons. So in California, particularly in the Bay Area and LA and San Diego, which is deemed to be a nice place to live by a lot of surgeons, there is an overabundance. And so if you follow the law of supply, then hospitals can hire them at lesser wages than, say, somebody in Arkansas or Mississippi or Nebraska, someplace where there's a real shortage. And there is a major shortage surgeons, particularly in the rural areas of our country. And these, counties, will pay a significant increase to attract these physicians. So a lot of it has to do with supply and demand. A lot of it has to do with your specialty. A lot of it is, do you bring something special? Do you do a particular operation that either no one does or very few people do, or you do it better than anybody else known in the land? All of that will, affect your salary.
Al, there's a question. How can you get rid of your squeamishness? And how do you find a place that respects you? Squeamishness and respect.
Oh, squeamishness. Okay.
Any of you guys?
I thought that was a condition. No.
Yeah. Respect. I think
Like
Dr.
herpes or
Gonzalez
something.
addressed that a little bit. Anybody else?
Well,
Okay.
as far as respect is concerned, I mean, that's a difficult and broad societal question.
Right.
You certainly want to make sure that you put yourself in an environment where you are respected and where you're needed, and you become a valued partner in whatever is going on. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're not, my advice would be to try to find your way out of that place as soon as you can. You would probably find more comfort in being in an living environment that's multicultural and accepting of who you are, despite your ethnic background, and respect you for your intellect and your abilities. And if that's not the case, then it's up to you to be active to change your environment.
Also, I think something what Dr. Gonzalez said earlier is that be the best you can be. If you do a particular procedure, if you're the very best, first of all, your cohorts, your peer group are going to notice that. They're going to notice that, and because everybody wants to be operated on the best surgeon in town, and so. And people will start asking, who's the best surgeon in town? A lot of times it'll be your colleagues, your cohorts, your peer group. And if you're the very best, you do the very best, the word a lot of times will get out, and that supersedes a lot of other people's prejudices. But it can be a long haul between being just hired and being considered, one of the best in your field. How do you get from point A to point B? But once you steadily can do that, then people will beat down your door to get to you. That's been my experience.
There's a question in the chat about video games preparing you for surgery, especially robotic surgery. Who wants to try that?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier before, there's been some studies that show that interns and residents who have had a lot of experience with video games, it's all about the hand-eye coordination, particularly, in fact, maybe Dr. Gonzalez, but working on robotic surgery, you're looking at a screen, and when you're doing open surgery, your hands are in the body, and you're manipulating organs, and you're doing your thing. But with laparoscopic or robotic surgery, you're actually working outside of the body using two handles to manipulate organs. It goes back to also those people who tend to be a little bit more ambidextrous than others. They tend to be a little quicker, a little more facile in doing surgery. And so the studies have shown that people who have done a lot of video game, tend to have at least a better, I won't call them better surgeons, but have certainly a better hand-eye coordination than those who don't.
Dr. Gonzalez, you got anything you want to add to that about robotics?
Yes, I would say the same. When I started my training a lot of the older surgeons who didn't really play video games had a hard time adapting to laparoscopic surgery. This was about 20 years ago. Now, with today's technology, I mean, almost all our youth has some access to all this Oculus and really kind of AI that's going on. It's just the field of AI, I think, in my opinion, is probably going to end up taking over medicine within the robotic surgery realm. And certainly, I see it in the operating room. There is a discrepancy between the older nurses and techs and assistants regarding their ability to be able to have that high hand-eye coordination and be able to see in someone's body within a screen. Some people just don't get that. And I think it's that ability to be able to play video games that probably at an early age set a scheme in their brain for being able to do that and develop it throughout their lifetime.
Okay, okay, all right, all right. Let's see, there's a couple more questions that came to me. If you are, what's the difference? What if you find the difference between being with a large institution, being in private practice, and maybe being with the government or military? Is there a difference in that in terms of your work environment or in terms of residency? Where, once you finish residency, where do you go? Do you go to our county? Do you go to Kaiser? Do you go to private practice? Somebody, they're trying to figure out after residency, what's a good thought process to where you go?
I'm happy to get that one started. It's all about trade-offs. So, and it's going to be important as you're going through residency to have mentors, to have guides, have folks who are a little bit ahead of you in the process so that they can talk through with you what are those trade-offs. So if you are in a traditional fee-for-service medicine, old school private practice in OBGYN, and you're there with just a couple other people, you are going to have crazy long hours. You're going to be on call every few days. You may make more money eventually, but if you're not there, you don't get paid. And so you might take less vacation, have a predictable schedule. If you come someplace like Kaiser, you're going to have a more set schedule, set of obligations, set of referrals, but you might have a little less freedom in your schedule and have potentially less max, well, certainly less max income. So what might be right for you at the beginning of your career when you're first getting started out, or if you have young children, or if you're more senior and you're looking for more leadership opportunities, what's right for the particular stage you're in, either professionally or with your family, can help you figure out some of those trade-offs.
I would agree with Dr. Williams. There are many ways to enter into practice these days. 50 years ago, the most common way to enter into practice was to go into private practice and hang up a shingle and start practicing whatever your specialty is. The trend now is most people graduating from schools are going to either large medical groups, groups like self-insured groups like Kaiser, or other local self-insured groups like Sutter Health and other groups like that, and become employees. And as such, employees, they generally receive bonuses to a certain degree in some models. But those individuals going into private practice now, it's very, very rare. It's a sort of like a dinosaur. Unless you go to, as someone has said in the chat, that their cousin moved to rural part of Illinois to make more money as a pediatrician. There are areas in the country where you can move and still hang up a shingle and go to work. I'm in private practice. And the benefits of being in private practice is that you have a lot more versatility. You get to determine your schedule, how you work, when you take a vacation. And generally speaking, in the surgical specialties, if you're able to get away with a private practice, in general, the amount of money that you make is going to be slightly greater. However, the commitment to your practice has to be greater also, because you're also not only being a doctor, but you're also running a business. And so you wear two hats. You have the hat of the doctor, who's taking care of patients, and going to the operating room, seeing patients in the office. And then you have the other hat, which is the business hat, where you have to worry about paying employees and paying rent, and doing all the things that it takes to run a business effectively and efficiently. So, as Dr. Williams says, there are trade-offs. Lifestyle may be better if you join a group and become an employee. Independence and self-determination may be higher if you go into private practice.
Anyone else? Okay, another question. Go on. Go on.
I would just add to what Dr. Strebik said, and to let everybody know that in fact the opening a private practice from scratch is not easy, and obviously I think it's in the realm of about 80% of doctors who go into practice are joining groups, and private practices have struggled to survive because of the economics of it and the economy of scale. When you have a group practice, you're protected from all kinds of contract issues with payers who will pay you for your service. And when you're in a private practice, you don't have the leverage that a group has to negotiate those kinds of contracts. And then just, hiring and firing employees, as he's outlined, is a whole lot of work to have that burden on one physician. So the majority of physicians coming out of residencies, if they go into practice, are going to group models because of what it offers in terms of shielding them from the market forces, and that's an important one. And also lifestyle. And increasingly, physicians want lifestyle. They want to have time off for their families. They want to know that they don't have to be on call every day and every week and every month, and they can have holidays off, and they can take time for vacation. So all of those benefits that accrue to them are family and personal. And given the burnout that's happening in healthcare, it's important for physicians to be able to benefit from a group practice, and that seems to be the model that's going to work, and is at least working for the majority of physicians.
Okay, one final question, and we need to wrap it up. Some of you have other titles, including your MD titles or the specialty that you're in as you move to sort of an executive position. Can someone speak to that? I mean, I know, Dr. Brooks, you're president, and Dr. Gonzalez, you have done certain things and so forth. Can you speak to the other load beside the doctor part that we should be looking for, that is dealing with leadership and also making decisions that could affect all of the patients and everyone? Some of you have different positions. Could you just speak to that as a final question?
Well, the issue of the load that you carry when you get into leadership and you become the medical director of XYZ is that you have to deal with other physicians who come to you and want things done a certain way and want you to represent them. And that extra amount of pressure is an important aspect of being in the leadership role. I think you should start by maybe in where you are, if you're a physician in practice, is start with your own group and seek to be a leader of your own group. And maybe we can have Dr. Gonzalez talk about that aspect. But that helped me by becoming, i.e., the quality assurance person for obstetrics is where I got started at Alta Bates. And then I eventually became chairman of the OB department. And then I ultimately ended up going to become the chief of the medical staff. But all along the way, I got experience in dealing with other physicians and helping to manage change. And I never thought of myself as being alone. I always thought of myself as representing my colleagues. And that's what you have to tell yourself when you choose to do that. And you actually can help benefit a large number of physicians by helping to put into place policies that address physician needs. So you should never forget where you come from, if you will, that you were a practicing line doctor and you were delivering babies at 3 in the morning and doing the work. But now you're putting a policy in place that helps other babies get delivered by other doctors. So you should view yourself not as this person alone, but that you represent your colleagues.
Okay.
I will say a couple of things as well. I agree with all that. My position here at Alta Bates has been, I started our what's called our surgical inpatient acute care surgery service. And it was really grew out of a need to take better care of our patients that come through the emergency department. And I worked together with the administration and my medical group to be able to get a group of patients, a group of physicians to take care of these patients in a way that was led by some standards that were placed by the American College of Surgeons. And we took that forward. I did that for a number of years, 6, 7 years. I've actually recently passed on that directorship to a new colleague of mine that has joined us in recent times. So I would say your ability to be a leader in medicine, there's going to be a lot of opportunities. I think as a physician, you are naturally a leader and you're trained to be a leader since you're a resident and in medical school. And there'll be ample ability to do that. It just has to do with you looking in the correct direction and finding a need for it. I've also am part of the board for Sutter East Bay Group, which is we basically help run our entire medical group, which is made of close to 400 physicians. And we oversee the medical group, give recommendations to Sutter as a whole, and how we will kind of journey through this whole change in healthcare that there has been tons of change recently. And I do that because I realize that either you're a leader or you're going to be a follower, and these things that will be instituted, you will be affected by. And whether you want it or not, you can choose to be there and help make those decisions, or you can just be a viewer from the background and then have to follow whatever new things are instituted. I chose to take a leadership position because I want to make sure that I'm at the forefront of it.
I think in terms of leadership, you can also decide whether you want to do an additional degree or not. So my MPH is actually health policy and management. I know Dr. Strudwick has an MBA. I'm sure some of other people have done other trainings or degrees. And trying to figure out if it's something that you are sure that you want to be part of your life. There are skills you can gain on the fly and from doing the work. And then there are other skills that you can start honing from the onset. I knew from the beginning that I wanted to do systems. I wanted to do strategy. So when I applied to medical school, I only at the med schools had a combined MD program. So sometimes that comes to you early, sometimes it comes to you later, sometimes you do more formal or informal training. But I think that if you decide that it's something that you want, it is worth considering doing the additional degree, and it certainly does help lend credibility.
So, Stefana, are we done?
You're on mute, Stefana.
Sorry about that. Dr. Taylor, the only thing I think we haven't mentioned is about the military and the great experiences that you can have. Do you have a few words for that you want? Because some students may have access and may want to go into the Navy or whatever. Do you want to mention anything?
Yeah, so there's upsides. I was in the when I finished, was in the Navy as a Navy surgeon, and so some upsides as you're applying to medical school. I was not part of the military and had not been part of anything military until I finished my training. But you can, you know, if you go to medical school and depending where you go, tuition and maybe $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. And if you apply for a military scholarship, and if you're accepted right now, that it's highly valued and highly competitive. So it's very hard to get. But if you can get a military scholarship, what they will do is they will pay your tuition every year, regardless of what that figure may be. They will also pay you room and board. They will pay for all incidentals having to do with your education. Plus, they'll you know, give you money every month. So and that can come out to be $500,000 over 4 years. And so when you come out of medical school, you're debt free. And my understanding, a lot of students are owing $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 coming out of medical school, and that's a lot of money. I mean, that's even if you're a doctor, that's a lot of money. So, so what do you have to do in turn? Well, then, you know, you have to pay them back for 4 years, and being in the, you know, the Army, Air Force, and Navy, it's not like they're going to have you in some foxhole, you know, shooting the bad guys. You're going to be in a hospital or in a clinic or you know, doing what you've been trained to do, which is taking care of patients. And so, you know, so like in the Navy, you're not going to be chipping paint. You're going to, you know, be working in there on their ships, you know, taking care of people, doing what you're trained to do. So, so one upside is obviously having them pay for your entire education, and quite often, depending on the needs of the military, you know, when you finish medical school, they'll allow you to go on and to go to your residency of choice, and wait till you finish. And that could be 4, 5, 6, or 7 years. But at some point, when you're all done and finished, you're going to owe them 4 years of your time, and some of that can be kind of good. When I finished, you know, I immediately had a practice, and I had a lot of surgery. In fact, I was, you know, I went to school at Hopkins and medical school in Boston and trained at Columbia. And when I came out here, I was via the Navy at Oak Knoll. There was a big Navy hospital here 10, 15 years ago. And I had, you know, hundreds and thousands of cases that I didn't have to go hunt for, look for it as in a private practice. They were there for me. And so then I also, you know, got sent abroad. Now the downside is, and again, I was pretty lucky, but when the Iraq War broke out, Desert Storm and Desert Shield, a lot of my cohorts had to go to Iraq and, you know, those places, and had to be there for a couple of years in very extreme circumstances. Again, I was just sent to Oak Knoll to run the residency program. So depending, again, if you're in the military, you know, you lose some of your independence, and you're part of a team, and you got to go and do what the officers tell you to do. That's certainly a downside. Upside is you can get a lot of experience, and when you're done, you owe no money. And so again, and so it depends, you know, if it works for you, if it doesn't, you know. But there are, you know, people who physicians in the military who ended up having to be in a war zone maybe not on the front line, but they were in the desert, and and it's just like a mass unit, and it's, that's not the greatest place to be with missiles and bullets flying. So, it's there's some upside, but there's some downside.
Okay. Dr. Brooks, anything else?
Yeah.
You want to close it?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for participating. This has really been fascinating and interesting, and I hope we've been able to give you some insights into what it means to be a surgeon. A lot to think about, a lot to consider if one were to choose a surgical specialty. And there's even sub-elements of each specialty that we probably didn't talk about, like neurosurgeon or cardiac surgery, but it's a world unto itself, and I think I would recommend to all of you to consider choosing a surgical specialty if it interests you, if what you heard intrigues you. And I'd like to thank all our participants, Dr. Gonzalez, Dr. Strudwick, Dr. Taylor, Dr. Amanda Williams. I'd like to thank everybody. Quite interesting and quite informative.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you so much. And we appreciate it. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. And for those of you regarding contacting the doctor, you can always shoot an email to dob@pmfmd.com, and we can help you reach them if you don't have their email address. Okay, but be sure to put your name and your telephone number in the email. I cannot stress that so much. You must communicate who you are and your information, because we get tons of emails. So, okay. Great. Okay, so again, thank you to that panel. That was a wonderful. Surgery is really special, and I've had lots of experiences and been very fortunate to have some good surgeons. So, any of you who are thinking about becoming one of the specialties in surgery, hats off to you and thank you. It's a lot of good things happening. Okay, so we're at the last part of today's workshop, and it should be fun and should run pretty quick. So this part is really important because this is going to be dealing with, and we're going to be talking about the overview for your internship with for your but your team projects that you have all individually told us which one you would be interested in. So if there's not somebody that has not indicated their team project, and for whatever reason we missed you, we're going to assign you a team, okay? And there, again, the second thing was that there are a lot of teams or a lot of project topics that had a lot of people. So we had to kind of even them out so that, they were, not 100 people over here and, that kind of thing. So we made them, we may not have assigned you to your first choice, but whatever project you select, it should be interesting. This is required to participate. Remember, as Dr. Amanda Williams said, it's a team. Every one of the surgeons has expressed being in a team. And what we don't want to happen, and we want to be really clear because it happened last year, is where a couple of students, they met with their team, but they went off and did the project, their part of the project, and didn't communicate it to the team. We're not going to give you a certificate for that. That's not how it works. So I want to be really clear about that. So the project coordinators are all experienced. We'll be ducking in and out to help you. And it shouldn't be overwhelming because you will have a format to use, and then you'll work on your part, and then everybody will pull together and pull the PowerPoint presentation together. So does anybody have any questions about that, about the team projects before we move forward? This is my fun part. I love the team projects, okay? So I think everybody, all of your coordinators are on except for one, am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's one coordinator that's not on and he's probably in transit. So we'll put everybody into that room. And then what we will do is I'll go to that particular room after we finish with this, so those students can just hold. So I want to first now introduce you to your project coordinators. And this should be a lot of fun. Oh, the most important thing, the project coordinators and I had a meeting last week, and we decided that there are 8 teams. I think it's 8 teams total. And your projects, we're going to select from the board and some other doctors. We're going to review your projects, your final projects, and we're going to select one winner, and that one winner will get a very nice prize. We thought about a first and a second and third, but it's just one winner because everybody is a winner. But we wanted to send the people who did a lot of work, and one had the information and all the good stuff. We thought we were rewarded, and then everybody else will get an honorable mention. We also will include this in a nationwide press release, which is very good for you guys because this project and the whole Doctors on Board program is nationwide, and you'll be applying for medical school. So this is something that you'll be able to include in your applications to medical school or post-bac programs or other internship programs. So does anybody have any question about what the team project is about and what the value of it is for in terms of your future and your journey to become doctors? Any questions so far? And if you want to speak up or raise your hand so we can see them. No questions? Okay. All right. Let's move forward. So I want to see the project. So the first team is Lemmy Ahmed. Is Lemmy on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Can we spotlight Lemmy? Okay. So Lemmy has been a wonderful, she has been with DOB and the internship program, and she's worked with us, and she's done all kinds of things. And she is one of our little shining stars, and we love her dearly. And she is a first-year medical student at UCLA, Geffen School of Medicine. So those of you who get Lemmy, right on, spot on. So Lemmy, you have the names of your students. And would you like to call the names, say a few words, and then call the names of your students?
They're already pre-assigned, so they don't have to worry about it.
Okay, but I want the other ones to know, okay?
Okay, so you want me to read out?
Yeah, because some of the kids know each other. Some of the students know each other, so, okay.
Okay. So yeah, my name is Lemmy. I am a first-year medical student at UCLA. I'm excited to be here and work with you all. I remember taking part in this myself. And so, that teamwork aspect is really important. And yeah, can't wait to work with my team. And I guess going off the list, sorry if I mispronounce anything wrong, please correct me in the small group. I have Gabrielle McDowell, Erica Lang, William Reed, Joy Davis, Ariana Hughes, Andrea Himon, Ariella Jules, Carolina Murillo Cuevas, Cheyenne Rizel Santos, Robert Bryant, Jordan Davis, Elijah Smith, Emmanuel Manso Casio, Antonio Nunez, and Andrea Wright.
Okay, and what's your topics?
So the topics are emergency medicine related, things like choking, gunshot wounds, any type of emergency surgery.
Okay, so all of your teams, you're going to break them up or do one big team, and they're all going to be in that project.
Okay.
Okay, all right. All right, Libby, you can go off to your breakout room, I guess. Is that okay with you, Carolyn and Tracy?
No, they all have to be assigned at the same time.
Okay, so we go into the second project coordinator, and that is Dana. Dana, I'm going to say it right, Abdelgalagar. I've been trying to do, I am insisting on saying this right. Abdella Gadir.
Yes.
Okay, this is Dana. All right, thank you. And
I
it's
am
a shame I
everyone.
can't say this, y'all.
It's okay, we'll work on it. Hi, everyone. My name is Dana. I have also been with PMF for many, many years. I did my undergraduate at UC Berkeley, worked for a couple years, and I'm doing my post-bac at the UC Davis School of Medicine right now, and applying to medical school very soon. I was also, likely me, in your place, did this internship, did DOB, amazing programs. And I'm very excited to work with you all. And the group that I'll be taking on is Women's Health. Go Bears. I see that in the chat. All right. So the students in my group are, and I might say your names wrong, so please.
Good, it's not just me.
So I have Jamet or Hamet Denard, Penelope Reynoso, Chinyere Ogugo, Lizette Lucatero, Mariah Williams, Amber Pippins, Jocelyn Martinez, Rachel Cage, Taylor Carr, Nisha Joseph, Kendane Bamba, Maritza Rodriguez, Marikar Almeida, Ayendika Sandiford, and Shellen Johnson. And when we get into the breakout rooms, you all can tell me if I said your name wrong.
All right, thank you, Dana. And please forgive me for not saying your name.
No, it's okay. We'll work on it.
I get it. You know, one-on-one, I can do this. Okay, the next one is a wonderful young man who just started working with us, Damon Rogers Jr. Damon, is he it?
Hello, everyone.
Hi. Okay.
Hi, happy to be here.
Good. So tell us a little bit about yourself and then go from there.
Yeah. I graduated from Sac State in 2020 of spring semester, Stingers Up. And I completed the post-bac program at UC Davis last year in July. I was going to apply that last cycle, or this current cycle, I should say, but the MCAT was getting me down, so I needed to take some mental health breaks. I began working as a scribe at a community center in Sacramento, and I really enjoyed that. I just took my MCAT last Friday, April 8th, so I'm in this low period of waiting for my score. So if anyone has questions about that, we could talk about it.
Okay, and you have your list?
Yes, I'll be doing the infectious disease and cancer group. For the infectious disease group, again, sorry if I mispronounce your name. You can correct me when we go into the breakout room. But Sheila Zagali, Deanne Jones, Elizabeth Denson, Mila Cunningham, Candace Trimble, Ebosede Elegbede, Jonay Boylan, Brooklyn Beard, Actinomwa Ola, excuse me if I butchered your name, I'm sorry, Johannes Mosby, yes. And that's the infectious disease group. For the cancer group, Jessica Madero, Savannah Jasper, Kayla Locke, Jessica Rivera, James A, apologize for mispronouncing your name, and last one, Ziamara Rodriguez.
I think I got a text an email from Candace that something has come up in her family. So she may be a dropout, just so you know that, okay? So I don't even know if she's on this session, Tracy or Carolyn, can you see? Candace Trimble, T-R-I.
She is not.
Yeah, I think she dropped out, okay? Okay, so just so you know that you're one short, Damon, okay? All right, so the next one is my dear Stephanie Lawless, my namesake, even though my name is Stephanie, which is also mispronounced frequently. So is Stephanie on?
Yeah, I'm here, Stefana.
Oh, okay, see, how they call you, Stefana? Okay, so introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and then introduce your team.
Hi, everyone. I'm so thankful to be a part of this opportunity. And I graduated from Humboldt State University in cellular molecular biology. And I took a break after that. I got involved in working with people with developmental disabilities. And then I decided that I wanted to continue my career path on to being a physician. So I started my post-bac program at CSU East Bay, and I'm currently in that my second year. And yeah, and so I'm really excited to lead some projects. And if you have any questions about post-bacs, it's non-traditional, but it's really cool. You meet a lot of really great people. You also have time to really figure out what you want to do. So I'll go ahead and I'll start naming off the people in my group. I'm working with I'm working, my groups I have are mental health and neuroscience and neurology. So I'll start off with the mental health group. And also I apologize if I butcher anybody's name too. Okay, so Olivia Dolan, Ausinia Hastings, Melissa Hernandez, Jada Sally, Courtney Spencer, Agodi Oenyidor, Haley Hayes, Amaya Woolard, Jordan Lewis, Dennis Akumo, I think. And then for the neuroscience and neurology, I have Ibosa Mbulili, Jesse Torres, Panay Paramore, Haley Shelton, Stephanie Bowen, Amarty, I can't even pronounce that. Analim, I think. Mia Glenn, Denisa Coffey, Catherine Montoya, and Salam Akalilu. All right.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay. And the last group is Tijan. Has he logged in yet?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. So Tijan, we can put the spotlight on him. All right. I know you had a run there.
Yeah.
So Tijan has been with us and has done a wonderful, wonderful job. And he helped us organize the National Future Black Doctors Registry, which we now, by the way, have almost 800 students in it. And if you have not registered, you should do that, because we're going to do something very special with those students in the future. Hopefully before the end of the year. So make sure you go to the pmfmd.com. That's the easiest way, and register for the Future Black Doctors Registry. We'll also have one for women, and that would be any women that's a URIM. That's not just for African Americans, okay? And then we'll do something for men in general too, and whether you're Black or Hispanic or whatever. So just wanted you to know, because sometimes we need to acknowledge our backgrounds and our cultures, but we also need to sometimes work in groups too. So here we go. Okay, Tijan. So say a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, where you are, and introduce your teams.
So my name is Tijan. I'm a third year at Berkeley. I'm glad we have some good bear energy in the room. I'm studying bioengineering and business, and I've been a part of DOB for I think like 5 years now. And so if you have, I'm glad to be a part of this internship program. If you have any questions regarding high school applications to college or any advice, I'm also here to help beyond just this internship. But I'm super excited. I have two main groups. The first one is heart attack, stroke disease. And again, apologies if I mispronounce your name. I have a Tijan, I get it mixed up all the time. But first is Alana Hernandez, Emmanuel Yalam, Christine Taylor, Christabel Amua, Carrington Smith, Ihi Oko, Iona Warrington, Arisa Caldwell, Kaya Boyer, Michael Palos. That's all for the first group, and that's heart attack, stroke disease. And then my second group is orthopedics, sports medicine, and general surgery. And that will be Bridget Wilkins, Nalaya Dubose, Gerardo Magana, Isabella Magdaleno, Shirley Zangali, Karen Thomas, Alexis Osley, Adrian Thomas, Marielle Felipe, Samaya Hernandez, and Stefan Joselak Gonzalez. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the breakout rooms.
Okay. Great. So now you have met all the project coordinators. So the next thing what we're going to do is for project coordinators, if you have two teams, they're all in the same room with you, so you don't have to toggle back and forth. And is there anyone that we did not call their name? please let us know in the chat right away. Okay, Tracy, you guys see anybody? No one?
All clear.
All clear. Okay, all right. And so, and then the last thing is this. If anybody, again, I want to repeat, if you have not sent us your photo or you want to change the one that you send, you have through this weekend to do it, because we are going to start working on the uploading of our closing ceremony, okay? So with that said, project coordinators, are you ready to talk to them about their projects? And I can, if you want me to, I can email them, or you guys can email them the material that we gave. It's probably best for you to do that. Okay. So with that said, that is the closure for the day. And you should go to your respective teams. Thank you, everyone. And I guess we will see you next week. We will be here, project coordinators, if you want to ask me a question. We will be looking at the chat, Tracy and I and Carolyn. Something comes up, somebody has something, we will be looking, or you know how to reach us. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. And